She walked into her own restaurant and nobody recognized her. Worn canvas jacket, plastic earrings from a dollar bin, scuffed shoes she'd found at a Goodwill 2 towns over. She was 64 years old. She owned 31 diners across the American South, and she looked, deliberately, like a woman with nowhere better to be on a gray Tuesday morning. She was there because 17 people had quit this one location in 8 months. But instead of lazy employees, she found a 20-year-old guy who was single-handedly running the floor, covering other people's tables, and disappearing into the back room for a few minutes every half hour. And then she saw why. And when the manager fired him right in the middle of the morning shift, in front of the entire dining room, she understood. What would happen next would change both of their lives forever. Stay with us. This story isn't just about kindness. It's about what happens when one person decides not to look away. Before we begin, drop a comment right now and tell us what state you're watching from. Florida? Texas? Ohio? Tennessee? We read every single one, and you'd be amazed how many people just like you are watching this very moment. The rain came down in slow, gray sheets over the parking lot of Magnolia's Diner on the edge of Savannah, Georgia, as Dorothy Caldwell sat behind the wheel of a rented Buick and watched the early shift arrive. At 64, Dorothy had learned something that no business school ever teaches. The truth of any company lives in the smallest details. The ones that never make it into quarterly reports. The ones you only see when nobody knows you're watching. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her silver hair, usually set at a salon on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, had been deliberately roughed up with a splash of water and a few careless passes of her fingers. Her good pearl earrings sat locked in the hotel safe, replaced by small gold-toned hoops from a bin near a gas station register. To anyone passing, she was just another older woman killing a rainy morning over hot coffee. Invisible in the way that people who don't look important often are, which suited her purposes exactly. Dorothy had built Caldwell Hospitality from a single roadside breakfast spot 31 years ago into a collection of 31 diners spread across 7 states. The business philosophy that had carried her through those decades was as plain and stubborn as Georgia red clay. Take better care of your lowest paid employee than you do of your most important customer. That lesson had first come to her at age 9, watching her grandmother, a quiet woman named Ruth who had raised 6 children on a cotton farmer's wage, press her last folded $10 bill into the hands of a young mechanic who had fixed their station wagon on the shoulder of a Georgia highway in January. Ruth had nothing to spare. She gave it anyway. But the woman who had truly shaped everything that followed was Vera Mae Simmons. Vera Mae had owned a small family restaurant in Macon, Tennessee, and she had found Dorothy at 19, newly widowed after a car accident took her young husband, 3 months pregnant, with $17 in her purse and no idea what came next. Instead of turning her away, Vera Mae had sat her down at the counter, put a plate of biscuits and gravy in front of her, and offered her a job before Dorothy had finished eating. People don't fall because they're weak, Vera Mae had told her that first evening, setting a warm mug of sweet tea into Dorothy's cold hands. They fall because the world doesn't give them a fair shot. All it takes is one person willing to stand in the gap. Dorothy had never forgotten those words, not once in 45 years. She pulled her canvas tote from the passenger seat, stepped out into the rain, and walked toward the diner. The interior of Magnolia's was exactly what the financials had suggested. Scuffed linoleum, worn pale along the high-traffic paths between the kitchen and the tables. Vinyl booths patched with electrical tape where the stuffing had finally surrendered. The deep, layered smell of coffee and bacon grease that no amount of cleaning ever fully removes. The smell of a place that had been alive and working for a very long time. Dorothy chose a corner booth with clean sight lines to the kitchen and the full sweep of the floor. She pulled a worn paperback from her tote, propped it open, and settled in with the body language of a woman who intended to linger. The morning rush arrived like a tide. Construction workers in muddy boots, retirees who slid into their usual seats without looking at the menu, Young mothers wrestling diaper bags and strollers through a door that didn't open wide enough. The noise rose steadily. The clatter of plates, the hiss of the flat-top grill, the ticket printer chattering away in the kitchen. That was when she noticed the young man. He couldn't have been more than 20, lean, with close-cropped dark hair and the kind of quiet, watchful face that suggests the person who has seen things that age you ahead of schedule. His name tag read Jesse, written in careful black marker. And he was working. Not the kind of working that fills time, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper. He caught a water glass before it tipped off a tray. Reflexive, no drama, no performance, a save that nobody else even noticed. He talked a flustered elderly gentleman down from a complaint about cold eggs, not with hollow apologies, but with a calm explanation and a fresh plate that arrived before the man had stopped frowning. He made change in his head without a calculator. He recited a 6-person order back from memory without writing a single word down. And he was covering part of someone else's section. Dorothy could see it clearly. 2 of his tables had drifted into an adjacent section that should have belonged to someone else, someone running late, someone not pulling their weight. And Jesse had simply absorbed the extra work without being asked, without complaint, without calling attention to it. In 31 years of running restaurants, Dorothy could count on one hand the number of employees she'd seen do that. But there was something else. At irregular intervals, never more than 3 or 4 minutes, Jesse would check his tables, make sure every customer was settled, and then slip quietly through the door to the back storage area. Always the same careful timing. Always the same deliberate return, his face arranged a fraction too precisely into professional calm. The careful expression of someone managing something he did not want noticed. At the 20-minute mark, he disappeared into the back again. 3 minutes and 50 seconds later, Dorothy had been watching the clock. He came back out. His apron was straightened with just a little too much precision, and she could see, in the careful set of his jaw and the slight redness around his eyes, exactly what he had been doing. He had been in there trying not to cry. Something is wrong, Dorothy thought, and he is not going to let it stop him. She set down her paperback entirely. She was still piecing it together when the office door at the back of the diner swung open hard enough to rattle the coat hooks on the wall beside it. Briggs. The name cut through the full noise of the morning rush like a blade. Every conversation stopped, every head turned. Even the sizzle from the flat top seemed to quiet for a moment. The man who came out was somewhere in his late 50s, thick through the shoulders, with the particular expression of someone who had spent years enjoying the fact that other people had to listen to him. His polo shirt bore the embroidered name tag, G. Marlowe, manager. He moved across the floor with the swagger of a man who confused authority with performance. His eyes found Jesse, and the contempt in them was not new. This was contempt that had been carefully tended for weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. Briggs, what in the world do you think you're doing back there? Jesse turned. His face went pale, but his voice stayed level. Mr. Marlowe, I was just checking on... You were abandoning your section during the morning rush. Do you have any idea what's happening out here? Tables going unserved, customers waiting. Dorothy looked around the dining room. No customer appeared distressed. The tables were covered. This was not a manager addressing a real problem. This was a man who had decided that today was the day. Sir, I was gone less than 4 minutes. Carmen and Deshawn covered 25 minutes. You've been disappearing all morning. That's not accurate. Don't you tell me what's accurate in my own restaurant. Marlowe stepped forward into Jesse's personal space, close enough that the nearest customers physically shifted in their seats. I know exactly what you've been doing. I know about your sister. I know you've got her stashed in my storage room like this is some kind of daycare. The dining room went completely silent. Jesse's voice dropped low and urgent. Mr. Marlowe, please. Can we take this to your office? Please. Oh, now you want privacy. Marlowe's volume went up instead of down, making absolutely certain the room heard every word. "You brought a child into a food service establishment. Do you know what the health department says about that? Do you know what our liability looks like right now because of what you decided to do this morning? You want to explain yourself? Fine. Tell everyone here why you thought this was acceptable." Jesse's composure cracked, just for a fraction of a second, before he pulled himself back together. "My sister is 8 years old. She has a fever of 103. The school called me at 5:30 this morning." His voice was controlled, but the weight underneath it was unmistakable. "Our grandmother is 76 and doesn't drive. She lives 45 minutes away. I called 6 different people. Nobody could come on short notice." He paused. "Our parents passed away 14 months ago. There is nobody else. She is in the far back corner of the storage room, nowhere near any food preparation area. I checked 3 times. I just needed to get through today. This would be my 3rd absence this month, and you made it very clear that 3 absences meant automatic termination." Near the window, an older woman in a rain jacket had stopped eating entirely. She was looking at Marlo with an expression that was not friendly. Dorothy was already half out of her seat when Marlo spoke again. "I don't care what you checked. You brought a sick minor onto company property without authorization. That is a liability issue. That is grounds for immediate termination." He paused, and something almost satisfied moved through his expression. "Jesse Briggs, you're fired. Effective right now. Collect your things, get your sister, and get out of my restaurant." The silence was total. Even the kitchen had gone still. "Mr. Marlowe." Jesse's voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Please, we need today's pay. I have groceries." "You should have thought about that before you turned my storage room into a nursery. 5 minutes to clear out." Jesse stood motionless for a long moment. Then, with his chin at exactly the level it had been before, he walked toward the back of the restaurant with the careful dignity of someone who has decided that this is the one thing he will not let them take from him. He came out less than a minute later, and he was carrying his sister. Dorothy had not known what to expect. What she saw stopped her cold. The child was small, 8 years old, slight, with her brother's same dark hair and her brother's same watchful face, softened now by fever into something heartbreakingly young. She was bundled in a school sweatshirt far too thin for the weather outside. Her head rested on Jesse's shoulder with the complete bonelessness of a sick child who has given up trying to hold herself upright. Her cheeks were deeply flushed. Her eyes were barely open. She looked very small in her brother's arms. From the booth near the window, the older woman in the rain jacket said clearly and without hesitation, "Somebody in this room ought to be ashamed of themselves." She was not looking at Jesse when she said it. "Her name is Lily," Jesse said quietly, to no one, to everyone. "She's 8. She doesn't like loud noises when she has a fever." He walked past Marlo without looking at him, past the servers, some of whom stared at the floor, past the customers who had gone very still in their seats, past Dorothy's corner booth. And for just a second, as he passed, their eyes met. If this story is touching something in you right now, hit that like button. It tells us you're here, and it helps someone else who needs this story find it today. And tell us in the comments, have you ever had a moment like this, where one person's choice changed everything? We want to hear your story. In that brief, unguarded moment, Dorothy saw everything laid plain. The fear of someone too young to be carrying this weight. The bone-deep exhaustion of a person who had been holding things together by sheer will for longer than anyone should have to. The desperate, quiet terror of watching the one fragile structure of stability you've managed to build begin to come apart at the seams. It was the look she had seen on her own face 45 years ago, standing in a diner bathroom in Macon, Tennessee, with $17 in her pocket and no idea what came next. Jesse pushed through the front door into the rain, which had picked up again, coming down in heavy gray sheets. He had no umbrella, no car. He tucked Lily's head more securely under his chin, wrapped both arms around her, and started walking east, toward the cheaper side of town, and the rain soaked through both of them within seconds. Dorothy stood. She put a $10 bill on the table, and she did not follow him out into the rain. Instead, she walked directly across the dining room floor to where Gerald Marlowe stood near the register, wearing the expression of a man who believed he had just handled something correctly. "Excuse me," Dorothy said. Her voice was pleasant, unhurried, completely level. Marlowe barely glanced at her, taking in the wet canvas jacket, the plastic earrings, the canvas tote, and placing her, instantly, in a category he found unimportant. "Someone will be right with you, ma'am." "I don't need service. I need your full name and your official title at this location." He looked at her more carefully now, still dismissive, but slightly less certain. "Gerald Marlowe, manager. If you have a complaint about what just happened, there's a customer feedback form on our website." "Gerald Marlowe," Dorothy said, the way a person says a name when confirming it against a document. "Manager at Magnolia's Diner, employed by Caldwell Hospitality for 11 years. Transferred here from the Columbia location 2 years ago and from the Chattanooga location before that. 17 employee separations at this location in the past 8 months. She paused. "Do those numbers sound accurate to you?" The color left Marlowe's face quickly and completely. "Who are you?" Dorothy reached into her tote and produced her real wallet, the slim leather one with her real cards and her real identification. She set her business card on the counter between them and watched him read it. Dorothy Caldwell, founder and CEO, Caldwell Hospitality Group. "I own this company," she said quietly. "You are terminated, effective immediately. My HR director is being contacted right now and will reach you within the hour regarding your final pay and the appropriate paperwork." "You can't just... I have rights. There are procedures." "There are procedures for a great many things, Mr. Marlowe, including the documentation of a pattern of conduct across multiple locations that should have resulted in your termination years ago, rather than repeated transfers." She held his gaze without blinking. "Leave now. Quietly, please." He didn't leave quietly. The back door banged hard enough behind him that several customers flinched. Dorothy turned to the stunned staff. "Who is the assistant manager here?" A woman in her mid-40s raised her hand slowly, as though she wasn't entirely sure this moment was real. "That's me, Patricia Owens." "Miss Owens, you are interim manager as of right now. I'll have someone from corporate reach you within the hour. Can you keep this restaurant running through the rest of today's service?" "Yes, ma'am, absolutely." "Good. Everyone else, back to work. I'm sorry for the disruption." Dorothy walked back to her booth, sat down, and picked up her phone. She had calls to make, a termination to process, an HR director to have a very uncomfortable conversation with before the end of the day. But for a long moment, she made none of those calls. She sat still and watched the rain running down the windows and thought about a young man walking east in that rain with his sick little sister pressed against his chest. And she thought about Vera Mae Simmons and about the only real way to honor a debt like the one she carried. Then she picked up her phone and started dialing. Dorothy sat at the small desk in her hotel room, reading glasses on, laptop open, phone on speaker, as her executive assistant of 14 years, a precise and unflappable woman named Carol Ann Briggs, no relation, walked her through what she had compiled in under 3 hours. "Jesse Daniel Briggs, age 20, Carol Ann began, her voice crisp and measured. "Hired 9 weeks ago as a server at Magnolia's Diner. No disciplinary record prior to this week. 2 write-ups for tardiness, both issued within the past 11 days, both signed by Marlowe." "He was building a paper trail," Dorothy said. "That's exactly how it reads. Jesse graduated from Riverside High School here in Savannah, honor roll both junior and senior year, which is notable given what was happening in his life at the time." He was accepted to Georgia Southern University. Full academic acceptance. He deferred enrollment once, then withdrew entirely. When did he withdraw? The withdrawal letter is dated 6 weeks after the accident. The hotel room went quiet. "Tell me about the accident," Dorothy said. Carol Ann's voice carried the specific flatness of professional composure stretched over genuine emotion. Robert and Diane Briggs were killed in a two-vehicle collision on I-16 14 months ago. Robert was 47, Diane was 44. At the time of the accident, Jesse was 18 years old, finishing his freshman year at Georgia Southern, and Lily was 6 years old. Dorothy set down her pen. "He was away at college when it happened?" "Yes, he came home within 48 hours and never went back. Lily was placed with a neighbor family on an emergency basis while Jesse worked through the legal process. He petitioned for guardianship the same week he turned 19, finalized in late spring. He re-enrolled in high school in Savannah to finish. He transferred mid-year as a freshman, graduated in June, and began applying for full-time work immediately." So the sequence is accident in March, Jesse comes home, withdraws from college, files for guardianship at 19, guardianship finalized, gets a job at Magnolia's 9 weeks ago. He has been a legal guardian and a full-time worker for approximately the same length of time. Yes, he's been holding all of that at once, for 14 months. Dorothy looked out the hotel window at the rain-wet parking lot below. 14 months. The same length of time it sometimes took her regional managers to fully learn a new payroll system. What does his financial situation look like? Stretched thin. He is current on rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in the east side area of Savannah. He needed 2 bedrooms for Lily, which pushed him into a higher price bracket than he would have chosen for himself alone. No vehicle registered in his name, no meaningful credit history, which is expected. He applied for state assistance when the guardianship was granted and was denied on a technicality related to age and employment classification. He is in the appeals process, which moves slowly. A pause. His paternal grandmother, Eleanor Briggs, is 76 years old and lives in Brunswick, about 45 minutes away. No driver's license on record. His mother's family is in Kentucky. There may be estrangement. I can't confirm details from public records. Another pause, quieter this time. There is essentially no support network available to him on short notice, Miss Caldwell. Everything he told Mr. Marlowe this morning was accurate. "I know," Dorothy said. "I could hear it." "One more thing. His employment application has a section for additional notes." Carol Ann paused. He wrote, "I am the legal guardian of my minor sister, Lily Briggs, age 8. I am a reliable and committed employee. I ask only for reasonable consideration on school pickup days when possible. That's all. No explanation of circumstances, no request for sympathy, just the fact and the ask." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Pull Marlowe's full file. Everything, not just the official record. Every complaint, every incident, everything reported and not acted on." "Already done. Sending it now." There are 9 documented complaints from employees across 4 locations, all marked resolved with no formal disciplinary action. 6 of those employees left within 30 days of filing. The pattern is consistent across all 4 locations. Public confrontations, scheduling used as punishment, creating conditions designed to make people quit rather than addressing management failures. Someone in HR has been facilitating the transfers. I flagged the name. Send everything. Dorothy spent the next 2 hours reading through Marlowe's file. By the time she finished, her coffee had gone cold, 5 pages of hotel notepad were full, and she knew 2 things with absolute certainty. First, Marlowe should have been gone from this company years ago. Second, that failure was only the beginning of what needed to be fixed. She also knew something else, something that had been forming at the edges of her thinking since she watched a young man walk east in the rain with his sick little sister pressed against his chest. She picked up her phone and dialed the number from Jesse's employment file. It rang twice. "Hello?" A young voice, cautious, carrying the wariness of someone who has learned that answered phones often bring complicated news. Jesse, my name is Dorothy Caldwell. I own Caldwell Hospitality Group, which operates Magnolia's Diner. I was at the restaurant this morning and I witnessed what happened. I'd like to speak with you if you're willing. A silence. 5 full seconds. Is this about something legal? Because I didn't do anything wrong. Lily was nowhere near the food prep area. You are not in any trouble. You did nothing wrong. Mr. Marlowe has been terminated and will not be returning to that restaurant. Dorothy kept her voice steady and unhurried. I would like to meet with you in person tomorrow afternoon at the diner, if that works for you. I want to hear your story, and I'd like to discuss whether there's something I can do to make this right. No obligations, no strings, just a conversation. Another silence, longer this time. Why would you want to do that? Because what happened to you this morning was wrong. And because someone did something similar for me a long time ago, when I was young and had nothing and nowhere to go. And I have spent every year since trying to be worthy of what she gave me. Dorothy paused. I hope you'll come. A long quiet on the line. Okay. Caleb, Jesse, arrived at exactly 2 o'clock the following afternoon, holding Lily by the hand. The little girl was visibly better than the day before, still pale around the edges, still moving with the careful economy of a child conserving energy, but with color back in her cheeks and enough light in her eyes to suggest the worst had passed. She was wearing a clean dress with small yellow flowers on it and carrying a stuffed rabbit under one arm with the focused grip of a child who goes nowhere without her most important possession. Dorothy was already in the booth. She stood as they came in. Jesse, thank you for coming. She looked down. And who is this? My sister Lily, Jesse said, with a quiet steadiness that told Dorothy a great deal about the past 14 months. Hi, Lily. Dorothy studied the rabbit. That is a very fine rabbit. Does she have a name? Lily held the rabbit up with great seriousness. Clementine. She's been with me since I was 4, so she's kind of old, and one of her ears is a little floppy, but she doesn't mind. Clementine has clearly lived a full life, Dorothy said. She has, Lily agreed gravely, as though she appreciated being understood. Dorothy had arranged for hot chocolate and a small plate of biscuits to be waiting. Lily was settled into the corner of the booth within 30 seconds, Clementine propped against the sugar dispenser, and she set about the biscuits with the focused appetite of a child whose fever had broken and whose stomach had remembered it existed. Dorothy and Jessie settled across from each other. Mr. Marlowe is no longer with the company, she began. That is permanent. What he did yesterday, the public nature of it, the way he spoke to you, firing you for trying to take care of your family, that violated everything this company is supposed to stand for. She met his eyes directly. I also want to tell you that I reviewed your employment file and looked at some public records this morning. I know about your parents, Jesse. I'm very sorry. Something moved through his face. Not quite pain, not quite relief. More like the expression of someone who has been bracing for impact and encounters, unexpectedly, something that does not require bracing against. You looked into me. I needed to understand your situation before I came to you, because I wanted to make a real offer, not a gesture. She held his gaze. I watched you work for 90 minutes yesterday morning before the incident with Marlowe. The way you managed your section, handled complaints, anticipated what people needed before they asked, that doesn't come from training. That is instinct and intelligence. You were also covering part of another server's section simultaneously, without being asked and without drawing attention to it. She paused. In 31 years of running restaurants, I can tell you that is genuinely rare. Jesse waited. His expression said he was listening for the thing that came after the compliment. I would like to offer you the assistant manager position at this location, Dorothy said. She slid a folder across the table. You would work under Patricia Owens, who is being promoted to full manager. The salary is $42,000 a year with full benefits, health coverage for you and Lily, dental, vision, and paid time off. After 3 to 6 months learning our systems, you'd be eligible for promotion to full manager. Our benefits package also includes tuition reimbursement for courses related to your role. Jesse looked at the folder. He did not open it. He looked at Lily instead, at her bent head over her biscuit, at the way she held Clementine even while she ate, as though letting go might cause something to go wrong. He watched her for a long moment. When he looked back at Dorothy, the careful composure had given way to something more raw and more honest. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I really do. His voice was quiet. But I can't take this. Dorothy kept her expression neutral. Tell me why. Because assistant manager means longer hours. It means staying late when something breaks. It means getting called at 11 at night when a shift falls apart. He shook his head slightly. I get Lily up at 6 every morning. I walk her to school. I come to work. I pick her up from school. I make dinner. I help with homework. I get her to bed. I set everything up for the next morning. His voice was controlled. The exhaustion underneath it was real and unguarded. That is the day. Every single day. There is no room in that for more responsibility. If I take a position like this and I start dropping things, at work or at home, Lily pays for it. She has already lost everything. His voice caught, just slightly. I will not let her lose the one thing she still has, which is me being there. He looked at Dorothy steadily. I'm grateful for what you're offering, Miss Caldwell. I mean that sincerely. But the right answer for me right now is a job I can do well and still be home by 6. This is not that job. Lily looked up from her biscuit. Jesse, can Clementine have some hot chocolate? Clementine doesn't drink hot chocolate. She might want to try. She can smell yours. Lily considered this. Okay, that is fair. Dorothy watched this small exchange, the automatic ease of it, the way Lily leaned slightly in her brother's direction, the way plants lean toward light, and she understood with complete clarity what she was actually looking at. This was not a young man who didn't want opportunity. This was a young man who wanted it so badly he had taught himself not to want it. Because wanting things you have decided you cannot have is its own particular kind of ongoing grief. Can I tell you something? Dorothy said. Sure. When I was 19 years old, I was sitting on a stool in a diner in Macon, Tennessee, with $17 in my pocket and nowhere to go. A woman named Vera Mae Simmons gave me a job and a bowl of soup. About 5 weeks after she hired me, she offered me a shift supervisor position. More hours, more responsibility, more pay. Jesse looked at her. I turned it down, Dorothy said. I told her I wasn't ready, that I didn't want to risk losing what I already had, that it was too much too fast. She paused. What I didn't say, what I barely admitted to myself, was that I was terrified. If I took on more and failed, I'd lose the only stable thing I'd found. I was protecting myself by staying small. That's not the same thing, Jesse said quietly. You were protecting yourself. I'm protecting Lily. Yes, Dorothy said, and I want you to think very carefully about how similar those two things actually are. She leaned forward slightly. Vera Mae didn't argue with me when I refused. She just said, all right, come back to me when you're ready. And she kept the offer open. A few weeks later, I watched her spend an entire evening going through job applications for a position she needed to fill. She interviewed 5 people. I watched every single interview from across the room, and I thought, I could do that better. I could see exactly what she was looking for, and I could do it better than anyone she'd seen. Dorothy held his eyes. And the only reason I was watching from the outside instead of sitting in that chair was because I had talked myself out of it. I went to her the next morning and told her I'd changed my mind. Lily had set Clementine down on the table and was making her walk in slow, deliberate steps toward the edge, then back, a small patrol, keeping order. I am not asking you to abandon your sister for a career, Dorothy said. I am asking you to consider that there might be a version of this where you don't have to choose. She tapped the folder.
Open it, please. Jesse opened it. She walked him through everything: the Employee Support Fund, the Child Care Partnership Network, the emergency assistance provisions, the specific dollar amounts, and the specific contacts. She was specific on purpose because vague reassurances meant nothing to someone who had learned the hard way that systems fail and promises evaporate. The Child Care Partnership, Jesse said, reading one page carefully. This is real? 3 licensed providers within 2 miles of this location, subsidized rates through the fund, available for before and after school, and for mornings like yesterday when the school calls at 5:30 with no warning. Jesse read the page again. Then he looked up at Lily. Hey, Lil. Lily looked up from Clementine's patrol. You know Miss Henderson from the park? The one who always has a thermos of lemonade? Lily thought carefully. The one with the gray dog. Her neighbor, Miss Gloria, takes care of kids after school. She has a big backyard and a trampoline. Lily's eyes went wide. A trampoline? A trampoline, Jesse confirmed. Lily looked at Clementine with enormous seriousness. We should probably visit first.
Just to check. That is a very reasonable position, Jesse said. He looked back at Dorothy. Something had shifted in his expression, still cautious, still not fully convinced, but the door that had been firmly closed was open just a crack. What if I take this and it falls apart in 3 weeks? What if you've misread me and I fail and Lily ends up in a worse position than she is right now? Then we figure out what went wrong and what you need. Maybe more training, maybe a different role, maybe something else entirely. I'm not betting on perfection. Dorothy met his gaze steadily. I'm betting on the person I watched work yesterday morning. I'm betting on someone who, when the worst possible thing happened to his family, didn't leave. He stayed, and he figured it out, one day at a time. She paused. Jesse, your father believed that your real character is what you do when nothing is in it for you. Your mother believed the most important thing you can do is show up for the people who need you, consistently, no matter what. She let that sit for a moment. Those 2 people raised you to do exactly what you are doing for Lily. I don't think they would call it selfish for you to also build something for yourself. I think they would call it exactly right. The silence stretched long and quiet. Lily set Clementine very carefully in the center of the table, like placing a small ambassador at a negotiating summit. Jesse, she said. Yeah. Is this the lady who's trying to help us? Jesse looked at his sister for a long moment. Yeah, buddy, she is. Lily looked at Dorothy with the direct, assessing gaze of an 8-year-old who takes important evaluations seriously. Okay, she said, apparently satisfied, and went back to her hot chocolate. Jesse watched her for a moment. Then he looked back at Dorothy. If I take this and Lily needs me, if the school calls, if she's sick, if something happens, you go, every single time, whatever it takes. I will put that in writing. I want to be home by 6 most nights. We'll build the schedule around that as the baseline. I want to understand everything I'm agreeing to before I agree to it. That is exactly the right instinct. Take the folder home, read every word. Call me tomorrow with your questions. A pause. The trampoline, Lily said without looking up. Both adults looked at her. We should really confirm the trampoline situation before we decide anything, Lily said reasonably. That seems important. You are absolutely right, Dorothy said. I will make it my first priority. Lily nodded, satisfied, and picked up Clementine again. Jesse looked at his sister for one long, quiet moment. Then he straightened the folder, set it squarely in front of him, and extended his hand across the table. Okay, he said softly. I'll try. Dorothy shook his hand. That, she said, is all anyone can ever really do. 16 months later.
Dorothy Caldwell stood in the back of the conference room at Caldwell Hospitality's Regional Training Center in Atlanta, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching through the glass panel in the door. Inside, a young man stood at the front of the room in a pressed button-down shirt, speaking to a group of 12 newly hired employees with the practiced, unhurried calm of someone who has learned that real authority doesn't need to announce itself. Jesse Briggs had accepted the assistant manager position 16 months ago. He had become full manager of Magnolia's Diner at month 7. 2 months ago, Dorothy had offered him a newly created regional coordinator role, overseeing 4 locations along the Georgia coast. He had asked for 48 hours to think about it. He'd called back in 36. In the conference room, one of the new employees raised a hand with a question. Jesse nodded, listened, answered with a specific example and a follow-up question of his own. Someone laughed. The room relaxed. Dorothy recognized that. The particular quality of a room that relaxes not because someone has performed authority, but because someone has made it safe to admit what you don't know. She had seen it in Vera Mae Simmons 45 years ago. She hadn't expected to see it again quite so clearly. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number saved as Jessie B. Lily wants you to know the trampoline at Miss Gloria's is regulation size, and she has now mastered the back bounce. She says you can come try it any time and she will teach you. Also, she wants a dog. Working on that one. Dorothy stood in the hallway for a moment, reading the message twice. Then she typed back. Tell her I'll be there Saturday. And regarding the dog, I know someone at the Savannah Humane Society. Let's talk. She put her phone in her pocket and looked through the glass panel one more time. Jessie was drawing something on the whiteboard, a simple diagram of table sections and rotation, explaining coverage to his new staff with the patient precision of someone who learned it the hard way and never forgot what that felt like. Dorothy thought about Vera Mae Simmons pressing a warm mug of sweet tea into her cold hands on a November night in Macon, Tennessee. All it takes is one person willing to stand in the gap. She thought about a young man walking east in the rain with his sick little sister pressed against his chest, chin up, back straight, not letting them take the one thing they couldn't afford to take. She thought about what it meant to carry a debt like this one, not as a burden, but as a compass. She took a long sip of her coffee. Then she turned and walked back down the hall, already thinking about who else, somewhere in her 31 restaurants, was working twice as hard as anyone noticed, and waiting, without knowing they were waiting, for someone to stand in the gap. If this story reached something in you today, something you've been carrying, something you've been hoping for, something you remember, we'd like to know. Leave a comment. Tell us what state you're watching from. Tell us if someone ever stood in the gap for you, or if you were the one who did it for someone else. Those stories matter, every single one. We'll see you in the next one.